Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister obviously thinks so little of his own MPs that he's had to peel David Cameron away from his 7-year exile in a shepherd's hut and make him Foreign Secretary. But a few months ago, the Intelligence and Security Committee said that the now Foreign Secretary's role in a Chinese investment fund may have been, and this is their words, engineered by the Chinese state. I hardly need to remind the Prime Minister of the threat posed by the Chinese Communist Party or the intimidation against members of this House. So when will he instruct the Foreign Secretary to give full public disclosure of his work for Chinese interests?
Mr. Speaker, as I said, I'm delighted that the former Prime Minister has rejoined government as Foreign Secretary. As an individual with unrivalled experience, he will help Britain navigate an uncertain world in challenging times. Of course, like every other government minister, he will go through the normal process with the independent adviser. But the government's position on China is clear. China represents an epoch-defining challenge. That's why we have taken strong and robust steps to protect ourselves against the risk that it poses. But we'll take no lessons, Mr. Speaker, from the Labour Party on protecting our national security. They've taken almost £700,000 from an alleged Chinese agent.
Wow.
This could turn into a bit of a rocks throwing in a greenhouse enterprise, couldn't it? So Barry Gardner, formerly of the Shadow Cabinet, took some money from someone who was suspected to be a Chinese spy. One waits for the retort from the leader of the opposition, who points out that the current security minister worked for a sort of counter-Chinese agency in Westminster, which also appears to have employed a Chinese spy who is currently under suspicion and has been helping the police with their inquiries. So this is an interesting area where both sides have problems.
For legal reasons, we should point out that Barry Gardner did not employ the alleged Chinese spy, and he said that, but he did take money. He only found out she was a spy, engaged in illegal activity when approached by security officials.
There we go.
Very good. So let's zoom back then. Interesting decision by Keir Starmer not to talk about inflation, which is fine because, you know, it's a good news day for the Prime Minister, but not to go in on Rwanda, the big story of the day.
Yeah.
And instead, maybe because, you know, it would essentially mean prepping two different sets of questions because you didn't know what was going to happen this morning. And they're actually going for the jugular on David Cameron. David Cameron's clearly got questions about his involvement with China. He was a very enthusiastic embracer of China when he was Prime Minister, and that seems to have continued since he left office.
That's right. And he's had links with sort of a company that's been doing business, I think, in Sri Lanka with Chinese backing. So, look, it's clear that he was appointed before the usual kind of procedures were completed. I suspect if he's got business interests, he'll be asked to divest himself of them, and that will become clear in due course. But yeah, the thing from Starmer's point of view is this is not just hearsay. This is something that the Intelligence and Security Committee has already drawn attention to, and you know, is a concern of the kind of securocrats in Whitehall. So, and this, of course, will have a dynamic inside the Conservative Party as well. Because a lot of those right-wingers who were upset about what's going on with Rwanda and with the sacking of Suella Braverman are also people who are China hawks and don't like this. So David Cameron coming back offends them from a point of view of often being Brexiteers. It offends them because he's more pro-Chinese than they'd like the government to be, and it offends them because it's helped lead to the departure of one of their own. So it's... you know, there's quite a lot going on that's antagonising that wing of the Conservative Party this week.
And it's just a sign of how far we've come in British politics that I was just looking at this, October 2015, so David Cameron, as Prime Minister, talked about a golden era in British-Chinese relationships.
Well, I mean, it was for about 6 weeks, wasn't it?
And then you've got the now Prime Minister, his now boss, calling China an epoch-defining challenge.
That's right.
But
I think there's been a lot of waking up in the West to look. China and Russia are slightly different. Russia is an overt security threat. China is in some ways, but it was perceived for a long time to be primarily a commercial threat. That it was about them stealing our intellectual property, nicking our ideas, and making them cheaper and quicker and in greater numbers. It's now become clear that China, which for a very long time had quite an insular kind of approach to the world, it was more concerned with people not interfering with their internal affairs and didn't particularly project its power elsewhere. It has spent probably the better part of 2 decades projecting power around the world and having a lot of influence in developing countries. And I think it's taken quite a while for the sort of security and foreign policy establishments of Western countries to kind of wake up to that. Don't forget, they've been obsessed with sort of Islamist terrorism since 9/11. They've been obsessed with collapsing economic problems, from 2008 and again more recently. We've had COVID, we've had, China being a sort of existential kind of foreign policy challenge, I think without all of that would have been much more on the radar for the last 10 or 15 years. But it's becoming much clearer now in the battle for resources and the battle for growth and all the rest of it that they're something you have to reckon with.
Here we are. Somebody's just been in touch. To not jump on the Rwanda judgment was an astonishing lost opportunity for Starmer. Shows a disturbing lack of agility. Stunned of Clerkenwell. Well, let's see.
Well, it is surprising, but it would only be surprising if we get through six questions without it. I mean, the other thing to consider, of course, is that there is a statement from the Home Secretary, and the story is kind of already there. Whatever Keir Starmer says about it, Keir Starmer's going to be the last 2 paragraphs after the judges have said it's a disaster.
So that might as well be
and the Tory right have said, it's up with this we will not put. If this is effectively, from a news management point of view, weaponising a second story that's bad news for the government.
He's got a separate story in the
I can
papers
see
and on
why
the
he
news,
might want to do that.